Breaking news in the Lilly and Jack Sullivan case is emerging today, and it is the kind of update that will shock you to your absolute core. After 7 long months of painstaking investigation, after 7 months of building a complex case piece by piece, and after 7 months of community loudly demanding justice for 2 innocent souls, Daniel Martell has finally been arrested. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police took him into custody early this morning at his residence in Pictou County, Nova Scotia. He has been formally charged with 3 serious criminal offenses related to the disappearance of 6-year-old Lilly Sullivan and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan, who vanished without a trace on May 2nd, 2025. These children have never been found, and the charges against Daniel are devastating, revealing exactly what investigators believe happened during those dark hours. This is the moment we have all been waiting for, the arrival of accountability. This is the justice system finally moving forward with prosecution after months of careful evidence gathering and forensic analysis. What are the 3 specific charges Daniel Martell is facing? What hidden evidence finally led to this morning's arrest? Why did it take 7 months to move? And what does this mean for Malia Brooks Murray, the children's mother, who many believe was equally involved? The answers reveal a case even more disturbing than we initially knew. Daniel Martell was arrested at approximately 6:15 this morning. Multiple RCMP officers arrived with an arrest warrant signed by a judge, taking him into custody without incident. He appeared before a judge this afternoon for a bail hearing where the 3 charges were read, and those charges tell the story of a horrific cover-up. The first charge is obstruction of justice. Under the Canadian Criminal Code, this means deliberately interfering with the administration of justice, misleading investigators, hiding evidence, and providing false information. Prosecutors allege Daniel deliberately obstructed the investigation into Lilly and Jack's disappearance. This relates to his actions after the children died, his efforts to cover up the truth, his lies to police about his movements, and his coordination with Malia to present a false narrative about the children wandering off into the wilderness. Every false statement and every piece of evidence he had falls under this charge. This isn't just a failure to cooperate. It is an active interference. Specifically, this points to his false statements about May 1st. He told police he was home all night, but security footage showed his truck 30 kilometers away at a gas station at 11:47 p.m. When confronted, he changed his story. That is obstruction. Furthermore, the coordination of stories with Malia is central to this charge. Text messages show them explicitly discussing what to tell police, reminding each other to stick to the script. This effort to present a unified, false front to investigators is a criminal act. Then there's the potential destruction of evidence. We know large cash withdrawals were made, and Daniel's search history showed him researching how to avoid detection. Soil samples suggest bodies were temporarily on the property and then moved. All of this points to a deliberate effort to hide the truth. The second charge is interference with human remains. This is an extremely serious charge designed for situations where someone disposes of a body to hide evidence of death. It doesn't require proof of how the person died, only that someone improperly concealed the remains. This tells us prosecutors have evidence that Daniel disposed of Lilly and Jack's bodies. They believe they can prove he moved them, hid them, and took actions to ensure they were never found. This is a massive development because it means prosecutors are confident enough to charge him with crimes related to the bodies, even though the remains have not been recovered. What evidence supports this? Cell phone tower data places Daniel in remote woods at 5:30 a.m. on May 2nd, the very time a delivery driver saw a truck matching his description on a service road. He was there for 30 minutes. Prosecutors believe he was burying bodies. Soil found on his vehicle matches that specific area. You don't get remote wilderness soil on your truck unless you were there digging. Additionally, chemical markers consistent with human decomposition were detected at 3 locations on the Sullivan property. This suggests the children died in the house, were kept on the property briefly, and were then moved to a permanent location for disposal. Daniel's own texts about taking care of things and handling a problem support this horrific timeline. The third charge is the most serious. 2 counts of accessory after the fact to manslaughter. This means helping someone who committed a crime avoid punishment. In this case, prosecutors are alleging that someone else, Malia, cause of deaths, and Daniel helped her cover it up. The manslaughter designation is legally significant. It suggests an unlawful killing without premeditation, perhaps resulting from mistreatment or neglect that escalated. This charge says Malia caused the deaths and Daniel helped her hide it. This explains a text where Malia said, "This is your fault. You said you'd take care of everything." And Daniel replied, "Nothing is my fault. You wanted this as much as I did." He was reminding her that she was the one who harmed them, while he was the one who handled the aftermath. He didn't necessarily harm him himself, but he became criminally liable the moment he helped her hide the crime. As we look at Daniel being remanded into custody, we see the beginning of a long legal journey. He will remain behind bars until trial, as bail was denied. But the shadow of this case stretches far beyond Daniel. It reaches toward Malia and toward a system that failed to protect these children despite early warnings. This arrest is just the beginning of the truth coming to light. With Daniel Martell in custody, the focus shifts naturally and intensely to Malia Brooks Murray. If Daniel is charged as an accessory to manslaughter, the legal implication is undeniable. The prosecution formally believes Malia is the one who committed the manslaughter. You cannot be an accessory to a crime unless that crime was committed by a principal actor. This raises the burning question: why hasn't Malia been arrested yet? There are several strategic reasons. First, investigators may be using Daniel's arrest to break Malia. Seeing her partner in handcuffs, facing life in prison, creates immense pressure. Prosecutors may be giving her a window to cooperate and testify against Daniel in exchange for a deal. The first one to talk usually gets the better outcome. Second, since she is the alleged primary actor, the evidentiary standard for her arrest may be higher. They want the case against her to be bulletproof before they move. The evidence against both of them, however, has been building for 7 months. It starts with a timeline. The children were last seen at 2:25 p.m. on May 1st. After that, only Daniel and Malia claimed they were alive. However, Malia texted Daniel at 7:15 p.m. saying the kids were in bed, 2 hours earlier than the story they gave police. Something happened during those missing hours. Then there's the house itself. Forensic examination using luminol revealed blood belonging to both Lilly and Jack in Jack's bedroom and the bathroom. DNA confirmed it. Both children bled inside that home. This destroys a narrative that they simply wandered off into the woods. Whatever happened inside those walls while only Daniel and Malia were there. The digital evidence is equally damning. We now know the household's internet search history included queries about how long children survive in cold weather and how police investigate missing persons. They were researching how to avoid leaving evidence. This suggests a level of calculation that is chilling. Furthermore, financial records show large cash withdrawals of over $2,000 from Malia's account just before the disappearance. They couldn't explain where that money went. Investigators believe it was used to buy disposal supplies to avoid an electronic trail. But the most heartbreaking part of the evidence is the history of the home. Neighbors reported hearing frequent arguments, children crying, and voices yelling stop. Yet authorities weren't called. Teachers had documented bruises on Jack and behavioral changes in both children. One teacher even filed a report with Child Protective Services 3 weeks before they vanished, but the system didn't act. Malia had even lost custody of them temporarily in the past. This wasn't a happy home. It was a pressure cooker of resentment. Daniel's text to friends showed he resented supporting kids who weren't his. He and Malia even texted about how much better life would be without them, fantasizing about the money they'd save and the freedom they'd have. After the children vanished, their texts turned to fear. Malia asked, "What if they find out?" Daniel replied, "They won't if we stick to the plan." When search dogs showed interest in certain spots on the property, Malia texted Daniel in a panic. When he found out the dogs didn't dig, he expressed relief. This is a behavior of people with something buried, not parents of missing children. The most telling exchange was when Malia tried to blame Daniel for the cover-up failing, and he threatened her with leverage, saying he would tell police what she did if she tried to put it all on him. This "it's you and me against them" mentality defined their relationship for the last 7 months. The prosecution's theory is clear. Malia, overwhelmed and resentful, reached a breaking point on May 1st. She did something that resulted in the children's deaths, perhaps physical mistreatment that escalated. Daniel discovered it, and instead of calling 911, he chose to help her. He became the cleanup crew. He made the midnight trip to the gas station. He took the bodies to the woods at 5:30 a.m., and he spent 30 minutes burying them. Then they waited, and together, they called in the missing children report at 10:01 a.m. the next morning. They stood before cameras and cried, pretending to be victims of a random tragedy, while knowing exactly where Lilly and Jack were. Today, that facade has crumbled. Daniel is in a provincial correctional facility, held in protective custody because of the high-profile nature of the case. He will stay there until his trial, with his next appearance in 2 weeks for a preliminary hearing. The community of Pictou County is reeling. People who searched the woods for days, people who brought them food and prayed for them, now feel a profound sense of betrayal. They were manipulated by a calculated performance of grief. While the arrest brings some relief, it also brings a heavy cloud of grief for the extended family. It confirms their worst fears. The children are dead, and they were killed by the people who were supposed to love them most. And because the bodies haven't been found, there is no closure. The search will now intensify in those woods where Daniel's phone pinged. With Daniel in custody, there is hope he will finally break and give up the location. Whether to get a plea deal or to ease a burdened conscience, the search for Lilly and Jack remains a priority. The justice system is finally moving. The lies are catching up, and the walls are closing on Malia. This is no longer a search for missing children. It is a march toward conviction for a horrific crime. The arrest of Daniel Martell has peeled back the first layer of a truly dark and calculated deception. To understand why investigators are so confident in these charges, despite not having the bodies of Lilly and Jack, we have to look at the sheer volume of digital and forensic evidence that has been meticulously gathered over the last 7 months. This wasn't a case of a single mistake. It was a series of choices made by 2 people who thought they were smarter than the system. They believed that by creating a unified front, they could outlast the RCMP. But in the digital age, secrets are rarely kept forever. Every text message, every cell tower ping, and every internet search leaves a trail, and the trail left by Daniel and Malia leads straight to a crime scene inside their own home. One of the most chilling aspects of this case is the premeditation, or at least the preparation. Found in their internet search history, investigators discovered that in the days leading up to the disappearance, someone in the Sullivan household was researching mechanics of a police investigation. They weren't just searching for missing children. They were looking up how to avoid leaving evidence, how long children could survive in cold weather, and forensic detection of blood. This wasn't behavior of a parent worried about their child's safety. It was the behavior of someone calculating the risks of a crime. When you combine this with the $2,000 in cash withdrawals Malia made, a picture emerges of a couple preparing for a crisis. They wanted to have untraceable funds, and they wanted to know exactly what the police would look for when they eventually made that 911 call. Then there's the cell phone data, which serves as a digital map of the cover-up. On the morning of May 2nd, the day the children were reported missing, Daniel's phone didn't stay at home. While the story they told police was that they were all inside sleeping or watching Baby Meadow, the cell towers told a different story. At 5:30 a.m., as the sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon in Nova Scotia, Daniel's phone was pinging off a tower in a remote, heavily wooded area of Pictou County. He was there for approximately 30 minutes, just long enough to carry out a grim task. A delivery driver in the area even spotted a truck matching Daniel's description turning off onto a service road. These 30 minutes are the most critical in the entire timeline. Prosecutors believe this is when the interference with human remains occurred. This is why the search efforts are now focusing so heavily on that specific patch of wilderness. The text messages exchanged between Daniel and Malia during the 7-month investigation are perhaps the most damning confessions of all. They didn't just discuss the case. They managed it. They reminded each other to stick to the agreement and tell the same story. In one exchange, Malia expressed a moment of pure panic, asking, "What did they find out?" Daniel's response wasn't "find out what?" or "we have nothing to hide." His response was, "They won't if we stay quiet." This is what the law calls consciousness of guilt. Innocent parents don't worry about police finding out the truth. They pray for the truth to be found. Even more disturbing are the messages that reveal the motive. We often ask why a mother or a stepfather would do something so unthinkable. The messages provide a window into a toxic relationship fueled by resentment. Daniel complained about the financial burden of kids who aren't mine. Malia spoke about wanting a fresh start and how much easier life would be if it were just her, Daniel, and the new baby. They viewed Lilly and Jack not as children to be protected, but as obstacles to the life they wanted. This resentment created an environment where mistreatment was not just possible, but likely. The prosecution believes this resentment boiled over on May 1st, leading to an act of manslaughter that Daniel then spent his morning trying to erase from existence. As Daniel sits in his cell tonight, the reality of the accessory charge is likely sinking in. He is being held responsible for the cover-up of a crime he might not have started, but he certainly finished. The prosecution is banking on the fact that his loyalty to Malia has a limit, and that limit is a life sentence. In the coming weeks, as more of this digital evidence is entered into court record, the community will see just how deep the deception went. Every lie Daniel told to the cameras, every fake tear Malia shed in interviews, was a calculated move to protect themselves at the expense of two children who deserved so much more. While the arrest of Daniel Martell is a major victory for the RCMP, it has also opened an old and painful wound. The realization that Lilly and Jack Sullivan might still be alive if the system had worked. As this case moves into the courtroom, the spotlight isn't just on the defendants. It's on the social safety nets that were supposed to catch these children before they fell. We now know that the warning signs weren't just subtle hints. They were loud, clear alarms that went ignored. A teacher had seen the bruises. A teacher had noticed the behavioral changes. A formal report was filed with Child Protective Services 3 weeks before May 2nd. And yet, the children remained in that house. This failure has sparked a wave of anger across Nova Scotia and beyond. How does a report about physical abuse in a home with a history of custody issues sit in a queue for 3 weeks? The system in this case didn't just fail. It stood by while a tragedy unfolded. Neighbors, too, are grappling with their own guilt. They heard the yelling. They heard the children crying, "Stop," and they heard the tension that seemed to radiate from the Sullivan property. Many didn't call the authorities because they didn't want to interfere or weren't sure if what they were hearing was enough. This case is a haunting reminder that by the time it's enough, it's often too late. The community of Pictou County is now a place divided between grief and fury. For months, these people were the boots on the ground. They walked through marshes, they combed through thick brush, and they used their own resources to help a family they thought was suffering. They brought meals to Daniel and Malia's door. They held candlelight vigils. To find out now that they were being used as pawns in a cover-up is a level of betrayal that is hard to quantify. The very people they were trying to comfort were the ones who had allegedly left the children in the woods like trash. This sense of betrayal is why the judge denied bail for Daniel. The community's safety isn't just about physical danger. It's about the integrity of the justice system and the public's trust. Legal experts looking at the accessory after the fact and interference with human remains charges say this is a strategic masterpiece by the prosecution. By charging Daniel first, and by choosing these specific charges, they are essentially telling the story of the crime without needing confession from Malia. They are showing that Daniel's actions are only logical if a crime, specifically manslaughter, had already occurred. It puts Daniel in a position where he has to explain why he was in the woods at 5:30 a.m. with soil on his truck and blood in his house. If he tries to say he was protecting Malia, he admits to the accessory charge. If he tries to say he didn't know anything, the cell phone data and text messages prove he's lying. This brings us to the most painful part of the current situation, the missing children. Lilly and Jack are still out there. The interference with human remains charge is a formal acknowledgement by the state that these children are dead, but offers no help in finding them. The RCMP has stated that they will not stop searching. They're using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs with renewed focus on the areas Daniel visited on that fateful morning. There's a desperate hope that now, with Daniel facing the reality of prison, he might finally trade the location of the bodies for a lighter sentence. The family needs this. They need to bring Lilly and Jack home to give them a proper burial, to reclaim them from the woods where they were hidden away. As we look toward the next 2 weeks leading up to preliminary hearing, the tension is palpable. Everyone is waiting for the other shoe to drop. The arrest of Malia Brooks Murray. The prosecution has already named her as the perpetrator of manslaughter in their filings against Daniel. The clock is ticking for her. Whether she is arrested at home or turns herself in, the narrative of the grieving mother is officially dead. It has been replaced by the reality of a woman who is alleged to have caused the deaths of her own children and watched as her partner buried them in the dark. This case is a tragedy in 3 acts: the abuse that was ignored, the crime that was committed, and the cover-up that almost worked. But as Daniel Martell sits in his cell tonight, the cover-up is over. The truth is coming out piece by forensic piece. And while nothing can bring Lilly and Jack back, the community is determined to ensure that their names are associated with justice, not just tragedy. The search continues. The prosecution is ready, and the eyes of the nation are on Pictou County. As the legal machinery begins to grind against Daniel Martell, the public is finally getting a clear look at the anatomy of the cover-up that paralyzed an entire region for 7 months. To understand the gravity of the interference with human remains charge, one must look at the sequence of events that investigators have painstakingly reconstructed. This was not a panic, spur-of-the-moment mistake. It was a series of cold, calculated maneuvers designed to exploit the sympathy of the public and the limitations of the law. The prosecution's theory suggests that the children were likely dead or dying by the early evening of May 1st. When Malia texted Daniel at 7:15 p.m. stating the kids were in bed, she wasn't giving a routine update. She was signaling the start of a nightmare. The depth of the deception is most evident in the behavior of Daniel Martell during the early morning hours of May 2nd. While the rest of the world slept, Daniel was active. His trip to the gas station at midnight was the first crack in his alibi, but his movements at 5:30 a.m. provide the most damning evidence of all. Prosecutors believe those 30 minutes in the remote woods were used to finalize the disposal of Lilly and Jack. The choice of location was intentional, remote, difficult to access, and far enough away from the home to create a buffer deniability. This is why the charge of interference with human remains is so pivotal. It addresses a physical act of moving the children, a task that required strength of vehicle and a total lack of empathy. But beyond the physical act of the cover-up lies the psychological motive that drove this tragedy. Why would this happen? The answer, found in thousands of recovered text messages, is as simple as it is heartless: resentment. Daniel Martell was not the biological father of Lilly and Jack, and he made his feelings about that very clear. His messages to friends and to Malia herself paint a picture of a man who viewed 2 small children as financial and emotional burdens. He complained about the cost of their care and the space they took up in his life. He wanted a life with Malia and their new baby, Meadow, without the baggage of her previous relationship. This wasn't just a man who didn't like kids. This was a man who saw them as obstacles to his happiness. Malia, too, seemed to share this toxic perspective. Her messages revealed a mother who felt trapped by the demands of her older children. She spoke of wanting to start over and expressed a chilling desire for a life where Lilly and Jack simply didn't exist. When 2 people share that kind of dark fantasy, the environment becomes lethal for the children caught in the middle. The prosecution believes this shared resentment created a permission structure for the mistreatment that led to the children's deaths. It explains why they were kept home from school in the days leading up to their disappearance. They were being hidden from mandatory reporters who might see the escalating signs of abuse. The cover-up coordination after the fact shows how they leaned on each other to maintain the lie. They weren't just partners in a relationship. They were partners in a criminal enterprise. Their "it's us against the world" mentality was a survival strategy. Every time they appeared on camera to beg for children's return, they were performing for an audience of millions, using their supposed grief as a shield against suspicion. But even then, the cracks were showing. Daniel's inability to keep his story straight about his midnight movements and Malia's visible panic, whenever investigators mentioned forensic testing, were red flags that the RCMP did not miss. The financial evidence further supports the theory of a planned or at least prepared aftermath. The $2,000 in cash withdrawals by Malia were never accounted for. In a world where every card swipe is tracked, cash is a tool of someone who wants to remain invisible. Investigators believe this money was used to purchase the very items Daniel needed for the disposal process: shovels, cleaning supplies, or perhaps fuel. Items that would have been massive red flags if bought on a shared credit card. This level of foresight is what elevates this case from a tragic accident to a calculated criminal conspiracy. As the community processes these details, the anger is palpable. People feel that their kindness was weaponized against them. The search for Lilly and Jack was one of the largest in the province's history, fueled by the hope that 2 children might still be alive and cold in the woods. To realize now that the grieving parents were likely waiting for the clock to run out so they could stop pretending is a betrayal that Pictou County will not soon forget. The arrest of Daniel Martell is the first step in dismantling that betrayal, but the shadow of a deception will linger long after the trial is over.